There have been 3 separate attacks on Israelis in the occupied West Bank. At least 1 person is dead, a Palestinian shot by Israeli police after driving into a group of people. A Palestinian woman was also shot and wounded by a security guard after she tried to stab him. The woman was captured on CCTV, pulling a knife from her handbag and lunging at the guard. It's the latest in a wave of violent attacks. Well, an Israeli soldier who was critically injured in a car ramming attack near Hebron on Wednesday has died. It means that since the beginning of October, 77 Palestinians and 10 Israelis have died in the violence. Stephanie DEKKER reports now from West Jerusalem.
2 of the incidents took place around the northern city of Nablus in the occupied West Bank, and one of them that was caught on camera, the woman that tried to stab an Israeli security officer, that was in Bethlehem. This is a change to a pattern really that we've been seeing here over the last few weeks, that most of the incidents, some of them disputed, of course, Palestinian witnesses, there are certain cases say that it's not as the Israeli narrative goes, but they haven't taken place around Hebron, which is where most of these attacks have taken place. So it does go to show just how unpredictable these attacks are, very difficult to prevent, also the tension that remains on the ground. And it all comes as the Israeli Prime Minister on his way to Washington to meet with Barack Obama. We know they will be discussing the tensions here on the ground. We know that the Israeli Prime Minister, according to Israeli media reports, has a plan to try and ease tensions in the West Bank and in Gaza, lifting checkpoints, perhaps easing the restrictions on movement. But I think very difficult to see how that's going to translate to the tensions on the ground that remain very real. Many people will tell you, Palestinians, that it stems from many factors, partially also a complete hopelessness in seeing the end of this occupation. And certainly we have heard from the White House in the last few days that a 2-state solution, that a solution to the tensions, to the long ongoing crisis here, the occupation, will not happen under the presidency of Barack Obama.
Well, as Stephanie DEKKER was mentioning there, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is on his way to the United States, where he's going to hold talks with the U.S. President Barack Obama. It will be their first meeting for 13 months. Netanyahu hopes to make progress in securing a new military aid package for his country.
The conversation with the president will centre on recent events in the Middle East, including in Syria, possible progress with the Palestinians, or at least stabilising the situation with them, and of course strengthening the security of the State of Israel, something the United States is always committed to, with the State of Israel's qualitative edge being preserved in the face of a changing Middle East and a changing balance of forces.
Well, Al Jazeera's Tom Ackerman is in Washington, D.C. for us. Tom, after losing its fight against the Iran nuclear deal, Israel now says it's seeking an increase in the U.S. military aid package, I guess as a sort of compensation. Do we know what that would actually entail?
Well, first of all, before we get to the military aid package, the president will be hearing from Netanyahu on what further assurances the U.S. will give to Israel about the follow-through on that nuclear deal. In other words, whether to what extent the inspections and all the other regime surveillance will be enforced. That's something that the Israelis haven't given up on. But as far as the military aid package, the foremost thing is a squadron of F-15 stealth fighter jets. Also some advanced short takeoff to landing helicopters or airplanes called the V-22 Osprey, but also a new supply of Arrow 3 long-range anti-ballistic missiles that are specifically intended to combat any kind of threat from Iran. What's conspicuously missing from the shopping list that the Israelis have talked about is what some people have called the bunker buster, a massive ordnance device that is intended or capable of actually hitting deep underground installations, such as what the Israelis fear the Iranians might attempt to reinstall as part of their nuclear establishment.
And Tom, we were just hearing before about the continuing violence in the occupied West Bank and East Jerusalem. Do you think the U.S. is going to try to put any pressure on Israel to restart negotiations with Palestinians? Or do you think that, considering Barack Obama's got 1 year to go, that ultimately nothing really is expected to move on that front?
Well, the U.S. ambassador to Israel, Daniel Shapiro, today pretty much said what other officials here in Washington said earlier in the week or last week, that there's no prospect really of any kind of comprehensive deal with the Palestinians, but they do hope that there can be, to hear from some measures that Netanyahu is willing to put forward that would be regarded as confidence building. In other words, to assuage the desperation of the Palestinians, and this is something that the Americans are most fearful of, that this would only lead to a Palestinian declaration that they have given up totally on the Oslo Accords, that they will cede to Israel full occupation, and they would leave that right in the lap of the Israelis. But of course, that full occupation also means that the Israelis would have a much more difficult problem in actually enforcing its rule on the West Bank.
Tom Ackerman with the latest from Washington. Tom, thank you.
I'm the leading state sponsor of terrorism.